Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation, and I'm joined by my brother and good friend,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning, Eric. I am in the hallway of the Hyatt Regency at the Chicago O'Hare area. So I'm in Chicago, Illinois, man. The wife and I made a trip, impromptu trip last evening. We arrived early this morning, and I said, by all means, I couldn't miss the show.
Excellent.
But glad to be here safe. And I'm in a hallway. The things that we do to have the conversation.
Well, brother, we are thankful that you thought enough of us and our community to join us on this weekend. And also, man, just grateful that you and the wife just made the decision, man, boom, go. Because we're up under so much stress and anxiety, man. We got to break out like that.
We do. And that's actually why I offered to her last minute, man. Yesterday, Friday, I got into the office around 4:00 a.m. I actually made a quick post on Facebook that I was up and ready for work. And I think that was around 3:00 a.m.
Right.
So I got into the office at 4. I'm chugging away all day. The daylight comes up and I'm all over the place, right? Literally driving to different locations. I had an outside project with a client, and I may have put on my car maybe 150 miles within a 10-mile radius, Eric. I was driving back and forth for 3 hours trying to pull everything together because, unfortunately, it's not always easy, Eric, to find good help.
Right.
And so I had hired a number of people for this project.
And
I received maybe 4 or 5 no calls, no shows.
Yeah.
And the client was leaning. The good news is that the folks that did show up, they were very, very flexible.
Okay.
And they were able to change. And so I'm scrambling a little bit. At the end of that scramble, just like any race, you're tired.
Right.
And so I called the wife. I said, I need to get out of here.
That's right, man.
Let's take a road trip. Let's go up to Chicago. As you all know, we have the spa that we frequent in Chicago. So we're going to do the spa today, do a little shopping. I'll obviously enjoy each other's company eating, but that's where we are.
Right.
How about your week, Eric?
Right. Good week, man. But it was interesting around people that you're working with. You know, they said to the women, you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince. As a man, you got to kiss a lot of frogs too before you find a princess or the prince that's going to work effectively within your organization. So that's not an easy thing, man. It's a good thing to be growing and moving where you're, trying to, bring on more people, but trying to find the right folks that are committed. We're doing that right now. I've got a new staff person that's going to join me in a week, join our firm, Integrity Development. But the good news is I no longer interview them on my own. Ken Wilson, good morning. Terry Cooley, love you both. And I know Ken can relate to this. I mean, I used to hire people, man. I'd be driving through Skyline or something. I might get somebody out to drive through. So we are no longer making those kind of moves, getting people all from my church or something like that. We got a process that we take people through. I have Judy and others weigh in on the interviews, including my staff. I vet the people out. I ask for references and talk through those and really seek to get good information. So the person that I'm bringing on, I feel really good about. The other thing I do a lot more of, Tommy, is I pilot people, man, 30 days, 60 days. Let's just see how this works, because it's important to make sure that you have the right fit, not just for us, but for them as well. And so I think that that's an important thing. And I have certainly found a number of frogs, but doing the 30, 60 days allows us to see if this is going to be a fit from a number of different perspectives. In terms of this week, man, our business continues to grow. We continue to be very busy. It does feel at times, you and I talk about this, like we are drinking from a fire hose. And so we're in need of additional team members to help us to continue to organize and grow our business. I also just completed my IDI Intercultural Development Inventory certification, and I have a couple of my staff that I've sent through that. So we're grateful to be certified IDI qualified administrators, if you will. So that's a new service that we'll be offering to many of our clients. But I'll tell you the other thing, though, Tommy, that I have found, and we're going to talk a little bit about this morning, is that people of color, man, are still struggling in many ways, man, within some of these corporations. I have one that there's a person that's serving as their chief diversity officer, but not really invited into the C-suite conversation about diversity. And it's just kind of shocking, some of the kinds of things that are happening. And so you and I have talked about this, that our topic for today, and I'm certain that Ken will weigh in on this. Terry may have some things to say. And those of you in our community, we want to encourage you to weigh in on this. The topic is inclusion a fantasy that no side truly desires? Now, this is what Tommy and I do. But the question that I'm throwing on the table this morning, while you and I are busy like gerbils hamsters on the wheel, we're doing our work every day, trying to change the world. But I'm now going to try to take the 30,000-foot view and ask the question, is inclusion truly desired? Or is it a fantasy that we have? And I'll mention these, Tommy, and I'm going to take a breath and let you. So here's some of the current issues in the media. Violence against the Asian community because the spas, and the man that said he had sexual addiction went through shooting up, all the spas, Asian spas. Racial domestic terrorism. I think that still has to do with the backlash that's created. Political tribalism. Governor Cuomo, he was a hero there during the heart of the pandemic. But now all the accusations around sexual harassment. And I'll tell you, where there's sparks, there's often real fire. And I think the fact that there haven't been a lot of advocates coming to the rescue says that he may have been better at communicating than he has been at being an honorable leader. And so even though Me Too movement came through and all like that, I don't know if we really truly moved the needle much around sexism, sexual harassment, and the like. And then even things like gentrification in the city of Cincinnati. As we look at what's happening, we're all, I'll say this, we're all so excited about FC Cincinnati. Okay, mix. But I would say that with all of that, the beautiful lights, Cincinnati going across the stadium, boy, there's some devastating things that are happening in the West End, positive and devastating, depending on where you're from. And so if you're of color in that community and you were there for all your life, now you've got some new neighbors. And it's not simply that they're coming in and moving you out or moving your neighbors out. Even if they don't do anything to your home, they are doing something to your taxes. And so if the houses around you are now, some of them $500,000, $600,000, $1 million, that takes your taxes up through the roof. So the question, so let me just say the concern again, Tommy, and then I'll take a breath. I'm concerned that with all the work that you and I are doing around DE&I, that, the truth is nobody wants inclusion badly enough to collaborate with their ideological opponents to develop transformational solutions. What do you think, Tommy?
So I think that, back in the day, or even currently in the text world, text messaging world, there's the acronym IDK. And IDK means I don't know, right? So instead of saying spelling it all the way out, I don't know. We just say quickly, IDK. If we were to take a look at this question, I think it lands on inclusion desired when convenient, IDC. Woo! Inclusion desired when convenient.
When convenient. Yes, sir.
So I think, Eric, that, you know, when we're talking about inclusion and whoever we are, it could be an organization, it could be a small work team, or even an individual. I really don't think holistically that we care until it's convenient to me. So what does that look like?
Jeez, come on, bro.
I would say we are desiring inclusion, and then I will parade another person or people that looks different than me, right? And say, look, this is inclusion. You see our X, right? At the same time, an organization may hire a chief diversity officer. Again, chief diversity officer.
Okay.
And that chief diversity officer is actually a manager or a coordinator.
Or special.
So the organization says, you know, IDC, inclusion is desired when convenient. That's my short answer. It is an answer that is coming out of experience with different people, different organizations, continuous conversations, not only the conversation of the moment, Eric, but I am following the conversation.
Right.
In other words, when I start a conversation in the middle of 2019 with an organization, with a person, and that conversation continues, I ask, you know, how are things going?
Right.
Oh, it's the same.
Right.
No, it's March of 2021.
Right.
We started that conversation in the middle of 2019, or in the beginning of 2015, or in the latter half of 2010. It's still the same.
Right.
Wow. I don't know if we really care about inclusion. Those are my initial thoughts.
Love them, man. You come out. I mean, you come out swinging, bro. I mean, you throwing haymakers right out the gates. I love it. Ken Wilson is awake this morning because this happens to be one of his most enjoyable passion areas. But before I get to your second comment, Ken, we're going to trash your first one just because you're not here. Ken says historically oppressed and excluded people desire inclusion. The majority population doesn't truly desire that. I'm going to take exception to that. And I'm going to take exception to that based upon what Tommy just said. It's one thing to wish for it. It's another thing to want to do what's necessary to make it happen. I mean, I don't think that we, like anybody else, wants to do anything more. I think it when convenient. You know, if you can just get me to the promotion, if people could just be fair toward me, then that's what I want. But in terms of the interest, here's some of my evidence. Fighting is far more appealing to too many. In other words, it's easier to be the aggrieved. And that is what we're fighting over. Guilt, shame. When we look like we got too good at it, then white people wanted to be aggrieved and feel like y'all making me feel guilty, and so I think that all of us kind of deal there. Division, blaming doesn't take any preparation, so I think that that's easy. All you have to do is look at one of the strategies that governmental systems know to use now that they've learned from us. That if there's a big meeting, police shooting happens. The community's outraged. Big meeting scheduled for the council meeting this Wednesday. They cancel it. That's what they do. They cancel now because they know next Wednesday, the week after, y'all won't be back. So the question on the table is, do we really desire that? The power of guilt and aggrievement, there is power in that. We've even monetized some of that. Blaming and shaming and pushing others, sometimes even when it's justified. It's more powerful to be angry, hurt, and aggrieved. Now, I'm just being a bit of the devil's advocate, but I'm going to say to you that we do have to ask the question. Collaboration reduces the probability of gaining and maintaining more for yourself. And I think that too often, Tommy, we give ourselves too much credit for being the victims and not the victimizer. In other words, being the victim of bias and not being the harbinger of bias. I don't think that we see ourselves as being biased. That's why Black men too often are not taking responsibility for our sexism against Black women. So I think that, again, I think that, and there's one other piece of evidence. We've seen a snail's pace of progress. We have seen progress. You and I have been in part of making progress happen. But I'm concerned. The reason why I'm ringing the bell this Saturday morning, Tommy, is because I believe that if something dramatic doesn't change, we will find ourselves in the same place 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now.
I absolutely agree. Right. And I've been saying that same thing in training more and more as part of a kind of a humorous anecdote. Yeah. But it's serious that we will find ourselves here in 20 or 30 years. Again, I would say that those who are oppressed, they're really eager for inclusion because it brings some advantage to them. Right. Either leveling the playing field or achieving or obtaining that which they did not have. It could be fairness, it could be equality, it could be equity, it can be access, right? And if I already have those things, Eric, that word inclusion is threatening. It means that I have to divide that piece of pie out a little bit more. So if I have to divide more, in my mind, I'm losing more. And so I will, again, put up the banner. We're all for inclusion, right? And we'll say that until you all change the page and start talking about something else. And then we're going to take that inclusion topic off to the table, right? We're not doing
that. My good friend and brother Dan Hoffheimer, man, one of the most brilliant men I know, partner at Taft Stentinius Hollister, good friend, really an activist, leader, passionate in the area, wanted to weigh in with some perspective that we have to basically keep anti-racism at the top of the national agenda. And I think that, unfortunately, Dan, I would say that when we go towards anti-racism, I think it causes too many whites to retreat. And it causes sometimes Black people not to be prepared to do our work as well. So I think anti-racism is important, but it's an element of the work. It's at the heart of a lot of the work. But I think that when we elevate it, other than for moments, I think we do well in moments of focus on racism. And then if we don't pivot towards inclusion, we can so quickly lose our white counterparts, or we can sometimes allow our most fringe hurt, people that are hurt, to sort of stay in a place that's not as productive for them or others. I do believe that it does take pushback. It takes protests. It takes frustration, sometimes burning things down, unfortunately, to get our attention so that we might try to do something. But at the end of the day, I think the question is still on the table. As human beings, is our self-interest oriented bigger than our desire to be inclusive and to gain the benefit of what comes from synergy? And I'm reminded of the time when the African-American leaders in this country were talking about coming together with Hispanic leaders to go to the major networks to talk about our common challenges. So we agreed with them. Yeah, let's do it. And then we ran off and left them. We ran off and left them because we realized that if we went with them, then we would have to share the spoils. I'm not sure that any people group has the character high enough to desire, collaboration and inclusion. I think we've demonstrated a lot more of that over the decades and centuries in this country. Let's see what Ken has to say. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. I agree with that, Ken. So he says that, that's a small minority of people. The average Black worker in a corporation is not trying to leverage guilt and anger. They just want to be treated fairly. So that's one part of it. You just wanting to be treated fairly is one part of it. The other part of it is, what investment are you willing to make to help others to get that same treatment? And I would say not much. Then that goes back to self-interest oriented. And if we don't find ourselves willing to really be in line to fight for and champion for others, if we're not willing to do some of that work ourselves, then in some ways you can ask, what right do you have to ask other people to do that? I don't know, Tommy, is that off base? What do you think?
I think it may be a little bit off base, Eric.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit, because if I'm thinking about trying to obtain some sense of fairness.
Right.
First of all, I have to try to understand what is fair.
Right.
Right. And I want to make a connection here in just a moment per a previous conversation that we were just having. So I'm thinking, what is fair? And then I'm thinking, am I receiving fairness? And if I am not receiving fairness, I have to really study and work to understand the people or the systems that have created this unfairness in my world, in my life, in my system. So if I am working in corporate America and I feel, I think, I know that I'm being treated unfairly, I'm asking why. And why is this system set up such that I'm receiving this unfairness?
Right.
So that's a lot of work. It's exhausting work.
No doubt about it.
To raise my hand to say, I'm being treated unfairly.
Right.
And then those who are treating me unfairly, or even the system, says, nope, we're not.
You're fine. You're being treated.
You should be just like everyone else and work through the processes, do your job, great performance evaluation, or do your job at home, and you'll be recognized for your work, that is your hard work that is done, etc. And so I don't know if that's accurate, that people who feel or are experiencing unfairness are not working. In fact,
so I agree that they're working.
I think we may be getting a little exhausted. And when I say by we, I'm not saying just me and you. Yeah. I'm saying I'm putting myself with empathy in the place, in space of those who may experience unfairness and inequity.
Right.
Right. And just like the anti-racism discussion.
Right.
We've transitioned to anti-racism from racism. And that can be polarizing.
Right.
So we don't want to talk about racism and racist, because that can be victimizing. It can be received as being victimizing.
Right.
So in other words, with unfairness, we don't want to talk about you are unfair. That's an attack. That's a criticism. Therefore, I'm going to be defensive.
Right.
And, okay. All right. I'll show you what the playing field is, and you just play the game. What unfairness is that when the rules of the games are changed, are we informed?
Right. So here's what I would say, and just food for thought, because I can be on the side that Ken is on, that you're on all day, every day.
Yeah.
But I just want to challenge us again to look beyond ourselves as simply victims of racism and oppression, which that is perpetual. But this is new thinking for me right now. But I would say that dominant culture traits have a difficulty in general caring about non-dominant culture traits. In other words, when we look at the church, where oftentimes men are more dominant, and look at the Black church, and then ask the same question: Are Black men in leadership any more concerned about the aggrievement to women as white people are in corporate America? I would say no, and women would say no. I think if you look at heterosexuals in this world who are of color, and to some extent ask how concerned are we about the aggrievements and concerns and inequities of people who are gay, lesbian, transgender? Not much. So I think as you look across, look at people who are able-bodied, any of us, and ask, when's the last time that we went to a march for people who are differently abled or disabled? We don't go. So that's what I'm saying. Nobody. So it's not saying much to say that we have a lot of energy to fight back against the systems that oppress us. We haven't said anything then. We only start saying something when we can evidence having been willing to invest significantly in the work where we are in control. And all you do is look at dope boys, gangsters, and everybody else. And nobody's doing it right, man. Everybody's taking advantage in ways that they can. So that's why I go back to the question, is anybody really interested in inclusion? Let's see what our community is saying to us.
That's good, Eric.
Right. It gets sticky in there because it's easier to be the victim. And we all fight over that. That's what people are fighting over right now. That's what this cancel culture thing is about. Whites now came up with a term so they can be offended about, well, look what's happening to us, and I love D.L. Hughley's perspective on that. Oh my goodness, he killed that. Like, you think you've been canceled. What about if your color stuff has had you canceled your whole life? So I love that. Bureaucracies are designed to stay the same. It's a tool of the empire. Let's see what else. Ken, we're going to bring you back. Black folks tend to be, I think, I saw dozens of Black folks posting. That's nice. I see dozens of white people posting Black Lives Matter and everything else. So I don't think that that's good enough evidence, my friend. I love Ken. I know he's going to keep coming back, but he's also thinking. Sounds like you are creating a narrative about Blacks being self-serving to make the conversation palatable for whites. I just think that that's what people are. I think that people are now, we as a community, I think we are culturally more of the we instead of the I. I think that there is some cultural, and Tommy, you could talk even a lot more about this, just looking at where we come from, how we had to come together to fight animals and everything else to survive. And so when you're in a place where you need each other to survive, you tend to have more collectivism versus individualism. But I think that my point still resonates pretty profoundly in terms of us being concerned outside of our own community in significant ways. Let's see if anybody else wants to weigh in.
Well, Eric, I would just add, as you continue to read, and our community is very, very much engaged, and that's the design of our conversation today. Exactly. And so continue to share that. I would also add that I think that overall, all peoples across this country and maybe even the world, we are more and more becoming culturally unidentifiable.
Ooh. That's deep. Yeah.
If we can date ourselves back, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, although some people did not agree with siloed cultures being siloed, there was an identity to particular cultures, right? And those identities were created and perpetuated by those in that culture. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example.
Okay. Wow.
So we have African Americans. African Americans now, we were called Blacks, we were called Negroes, we were called colored, we were called all kinds of names by other people.
Right.
However, African Americans, Blacks, Negroes, etc., we created a culture within itself. Part of it was linguistic. It was our language. And that language first began with our nonverbals, right? And we learned that from the generations before. It's the look, right? It's that posture. It's the gait. It's our walk. It's the head nod.
Right.
It's the hand slap.
Right.
And then the verbal linguistic was, how do we talk to each other? How do we use a language that was given to us.
Right.
And we created a culture in that.
Right.
So when we work in corporate America or in the workforce, we can be amongst other cultures and speak our language. Now, I'm not only talking about Ebonics.
Right. Right.
And African Americans, you will know what I'm talking about.
Right. Exactly.
There's certain language that we use with each other that is part of our culture, while we are code switching to work within another culture. So as a non-dominant culture, we're working within that dominant culture. Other cultures, it could be through the interaction and the experience of food, just like African Americans, say Italians, Irish, right? Pacific Islanders.
Right.
We can go down this list. I think now holistically, Eric, that because of a lot of factors, we have individuals and small groups of folks, it could be a few 100,000 people who've gone a different direction and may not even identify themselves as part of that former culture or community.
No doubt about it.
So now you can work in a particular location, or a particular industry for 30 years and say, I don't, as a Black person, for example, I don't understand Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Not only do I not understand the movement, I don't understand the phrase or the statement.
Right.
A Black person saying, I don't understand the statement that Black Lives Matter. That's cultural unidentifiable. Meaning I don't really attach myself and see the value of being Black.
You're preaching, brother. You're saying something right now. And because of intersectionality and people having multiple diversities that they experience, I'm going to keep scratching on this scab right now, Tommy. I feel some energy around it to put pressure back on us to answer the question, do we care any more about inclusion than anybody else? And I'm going to say for a minute, no, or maybe not. The question I'm going to throw on the table is the Black elite. Are they any more interested in bringing in poor Blacks as the dominant culture whites in corporation are interested in bringing in people of color? I'd say that's a question that is legitimately on the table. And I think if you ask people that come from less means, they would say no. But then you could take it the other way, because we've seen it both ways. It just doesn't have as great an impact on the lives of the wealthy. But I don't know if poor African Americans, Blacks, are as open to welcoming of celebratory of people of greater means. I think that those are rubs. And I think that all of us struggle across these dimensions of difference. And I think it's easy. And to some extent, it lets us off of the work that's necessary to get the answer, to always otherize everything and put all the solutions outside of our own community. I think it's a problem for us, Tommy. In other words, here's what I hate people saying. If you give racism all the control over your life, and you sit back and say, I can't get it done until racism is gone, then you're never going to be anything. I wake up every day and believe to some extent that with my talent, skill, ability, with my faith, with my family and others, that we can still make it. Are some of my non-dominant culture traits going to throw barriers and obstacles in my way? Yes, absolutely. I think that all people are challenged by that. Again, I love it. Can't answer white people in this discussion. He is not going to lay down at all, is he? He said, hey, okay, this is good. Are they having this? There are some differences. In other words, if you feel as though your difference is more costly to your livelihood, then it is in more in your own self-interest to have the conversation. But I'd say that if you don't see your difference as being a significant barrier to your success, then you're probably not having that conversation.
I'm going to take a stab at Ken's question, right? Or why people are having this discussion. I would say yes, but here's how the discussion goes.
Oh,
Um, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, right? About all this talk, whatever it is. Folks trying to raise up in the organization, trying to get promoted, trying to have an equal playing field. All this other society stuff. I wish they would just play the game or play their position or kind of do what they need to do. I'm feeling uncomfortable, and I'm sick and tired of it. And I'm about to tell everybody that I'm feeling uncomfortable. And so when we have this discussion outside of within our community, being Caucasian or white, I'm going to expect the others to make me feel more comfortable, right? I'm going to expect that
right.
because it's not my job, and I didn't even ask to feel uncomfortable, right? I think that's how that conversation goes, and
Right.
it probably lasts as long as I just said it.
Right.
That
So let me
45
go
seconds.
further. Right, because I think you're right, in part. But I would say that everybody is having the aggrievement discussion. In other words, our conversation is about survival, exclusion, and aggrievement as a result of that. Everybody's having that one. Theirs is just different. So when I see the white male, blue collar in the union, his conversation every day is over his aggrievement about management not doing him right. Every day.
Yeah.
He's having an inclusion conversation, but it's not about race. It's about class.
Yeah.
I think people in sexual orientation, the gay, lesbian, transgender, they're having the aggrievement conversation on a regular basis. It's about how they're being left out. Leaders, executives, they sometimes are having the aggrievement conversation. Sometimes, not as often, because life feels better for them. When life is better for you economically, then you're not as upset about stuff. Their aggrievement conversation is about, as much as we do for people, I can't believe they don't appreciate us more. All that we've tried to do, this is what we get. So that's what I'm saying, is that everybody does well having the aggrievement conversation. The question is, who cares at all about inclusion? So aggrievement, if we all just get bigger megaphones, because that's what I see right now, Tommy, everybody going out saying, it was too small. My megaphone was too small. So they go get a bigger one. They just start yelling louder, man. And I don't think that progress happens. So what I'm calling for is transformative, disruptive thinking in this space. And are there solutions that can be appealing, more broadly appealing to all of us? Because I don't even think this one right now is appealing to us. It's not appealing to us. We're tired of having it. We're tired of being left out. Tired of being excluded and overrun, But the question is, Tommy, this is a big question, man, because you and I can't do this by ourselves, can we?
No, not at all.
With all the people in the industry or whatever. Because if people remain comfortable, point, counterpoint, arguing back and forth, is there anything at all appealing about inclusion to make it transformative or significant enough that people would be willing to stand with it long enough to see its value?
So I want to also add, Eric, that as you were sharing, and then obviously with Ken and Kendall and everyone else in the community that's sharing back, I would also add that I would encourage us, as we're listening and participating in this conversation, to refrain from passing judgment on generalizations.
Yeah.
In other words,
that's good.
We are making some generalizations.
Right.
And so to say that's a generalization, we know that. All of us know that.
Right.
And to call out just specific things, well, this one time out of the 1 million interactions was the anomaly.
Right.
We know this as well. So we're having this conversation, and I would like to encourage folks, as I do myself, is to also pay attention to what resonates in you.
Yeah.
So part of this conversation, like, oh, that's something I can hang my hook on and go back and forth or agree or disagree, whatever the case may be. The question is why? Why did that word or why did that phrase, why did that question or statement hit that chord and resonate? Now, that is an individual response. And some of us, Eric, we're not concerned with the organization. We're not
Right.
concerned about the team. I'm just trying to get food or transportation. I'm just trying to get through my life, right? I don't have time to be solving the problems of the company or the city, state, or country or world. I don't have time for that, right? What I need answers on is we're talking about inclusion. I've always been excluded. How can I get the job, right?
Right.
Because I'm on my 13th or 15th or 20th interview.
Right.
And I've been told I've been overqualified, whatever that means,
Right.
overqualified, right? I want this job. I have the skills and abilities, but you're judging me saying I'm overqualified as if I don't want it or I don't deserve it. I need the job. And then some people are underqualified. All right. There are people doing their jobs right now. There are people who are living in particular relationships right now who are not contributing to that relationship, and they're underqualified to make the relationship go forward. They have deficits in certain abilities, skills, and like having a conversation, a courageous conversation that
Right.
when it gets tough and we have to be inclusive in the conversation, I can't go there, but I think it's going to rain today. What? You can't even control the weather. And
Right.
sure, it's good to talk about it every now and again, but what are we talking about here?
Right.
That's the cycle of where people go in conversations. They really gravitate and land on what they see of value.
Right. And I think that you're spot on, man, with a lot of people are really stuck with their own life experiences. And they're saying to some extent, I don't have the discretionary energy to care beyond that. Here's what I would say then, Tommy. Let me ask you this. I would say, and I like that you said you made sure that you qualified that we're generalizing. And to some extent, in order to be provocative. So right now, and what I want to do is I want to provoke our thinking. That's all. I'm not trying to just be sort of aimlessly provocative. I want to provoke our thinking for transformation to occur. So I'm going to throw another. I like to do this sometimes, Tommy. I just hand a grenade, just pull a pin and throw it out into the room, man. Just see everybody scatter. That's what I like to do. So I'm going to pull a hand grenade on this issue. And this is contrary to what you and I do every day, but let's just go ahead and challenge our community a bit and our own thinking. I would say very few people are interested in inclusion, but almost everybody's interested in being included. That's what we're interested in. We're interested in being included. But once we get included, now our passion for inclusion diminishes. We've seen that in the form of people that look like you and I getting into the C-suite and then locking the door, or climbing up the ladder, getting to the semi-top and then throwing the ladder down. That's what we've seen. And so I think that we have to then re-examine. And why am I asking, Tommy, us to re-examine whether we're interested in inclusion or not? Why are we posing that question?
We're posing that question, I think, from my perspective, Eric, for a number of reasons. For me, first, because I don't have the answer.
Right. Me neither.
I don't have the answer. And so with not having the answer and wanting some clarity, and clarity brings sometimes direction, and direction can firm purpose. So we have to live purpose-driven lives for the most part. So we're asking this thing around inclusion, especially as you know, God-fearing people, that there's a plan that's been placed on all of us. And some of us think, you know, exclusion is not God's plan.
Right.
He didn't put us on this earth to be alone. And why can't we coexist?
Right.
Right.
That's it.
And so we're asking that question, having that conversation.
That's right.
And what it keeps coming back to is sometimes points of view,
right.
experiences,
right,
and maybe even agendas. So my agenda is to make it up in the ranks in my organization. And so I will IDC, inclusions desired from convenience. But once I achieve what I've aimed to achieve, then IDK. I don't care. Right? And so we have to identify where we truly are as individuals as well as collectively, Eric. We have to truly, truly understand. This could be in a relationship too. A lot of things that we do to court another person is to be included, to act like we really are, you know, concerned with them and their life and et cetera. And that inclusion is desired for convenience. The convenience is that I want you. Right. There's a need, there's a desire. Right. Right. And then we are able to achieve that relationship. And many years later, kind of going the course, I said, hey, are we going to take those walks again? Right. What walks? You know, the walks we used to take when we were dating, right? And we were learning each other. We were walking lock and step. No, I don't walk anymore. I don't care about walking, right? I'm already in the house and you're in the house, right? And that's that kind of that privilege and entitlement sometimes. Right.
And so I would have to say, so let me say this to put the community a little bit at ease. I've taken them up to the red sort of orange state, you know, when they say in the airport, when it goes orange, like, okay, let me bring the temperature down a little bit. I do recognize that the people that generally get up to join us, Tommy, are a different class of people. They're a different crowd. They're people that are more interested in these conversations. They wouldn't come to this if they had no interest in it. So I think that this is a different slice. And that's why it doesn't comfortably settle easily with us being challenged on whether we're interested in inclusion. But I also believe, Tommy, it would be cheap. That's the word I'm going to use. It would be cheap for me to throw this out as though it's a challenge for others only. Tommy, the only thing that will make this credible and authentic is for me to recognize it as a challenge for me too. This ain't just a challenge for the community. This is a challenge for me. The other thing, Tommy, that I would say is one of the greatest things that still, one of the greatest spaces that we maintain freedom is in our mind. But nobody gets to see exactly what you and I think, believe, or anything else, except us. And so I have to actually go to my own mind and ask the questions. Now, I will say this to you as a qualifier. If you find it too easy for you to dismiss the notion, the question of, am I truly inclusive, then join everybody else that's in denial. Everybody else that says that it's not me. I haven't done it. I'm good. I like this, Steve. Steve says sometimes the issue is trusting the people you bring to the table. Steve, I'll go a little further in this way. I'm going to go off on a tangent, then we're going to come back to this. Tommy, I have seen people in this city who have gotten the opportunity, gone in and shut the door. They saw me coming close to the door and boom, they slammed it. And you know what? I understood that. I wasn't just mad, Tommy. That's how far I go with this. I understood it. Because basically, here's the calculation they made. Here's what they said in their mind. And you and I have chose to not say this. Here's what they said in their mind. These organizations only do onesies. If Tommy or Eric comes along, they kind of appealing. So I got to go and shut this door, bro. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut the door. I get it. And so I'm not even mad. But I believe that we have to be able to go beyond that. And what you and I decided, Tommy, when we came here together, was that the world's too big, we're too small. And if we join forces and share knowledge, that number one, we make each other better. But we also shore up our survival in this big world that we're living in. But that's something that takes a lot of practice and time. And none of us dives into that easily, do we, Tommy?
No, not at all. Not at all. So Eric, I'll add this comment and then come back to Steve's statement. And when you were sharing your piece, it reminded me. I have personally and professionally been invited to the table. And then the person or people who have invited me to the table have asked, how did you get here? You invited me.
Right.
You invited me. I've been there, and I've been there so many times that it's frustrating where folks have invited me a part of the conversation, be it a board member, be it just a contributor, be it a consultant, and then I get there and they're like, yeah, tell me about yourself and how did you get here? I'm looking, you.
Right.
You did it.
Right.
And I've had the need, Eric, to invite different people, different thoughts, different experiences to the table with the idea of inclusion, with the idea of moving the needle. And then once the people have arrived to the table, what they were doing and saying and even the energy, I didn't always trust.
Right.
And I would ask myself, maybe even ask them, who are you and who sent you?
Right.
Because for whatever reason, you ended up on my radar that I invited you, because I didn't know you before, maybe 10 years, 20 years ago, but we've crossed paths. We're in the picture frame. I'm a little bit suspect here of, were you placed in the picture frame or did I turn my vision and see you? Eric, I've been in circumstances where I'm at the table, a number of other people are at the table, and someone's been placed in the picture frame, such as, you may want to consider, having so-and-so on the table, at the table. Right. And then sure, in the vein of inclusion, in the vein of equity, in the vein of moving forward. And then they get there, I don't know if I trust this. Oh, I can't tell you how many times in equity councils that we've created with organizations, et cetera, and something comes out of the person's mouth, and I know, my spirit knows, you do not have goodwill.
Right, Tommy.
You are here as a messenger for someone or something. Right. So I agree that sometimes the issue is trusting who's at the table.
And I'll never forget the story of the slave consultant. You all know it. They went around and told slave owners, stop beating your slaves. You're beating up your property. I've got a strategy that works much better than that. Use distrust and bring some into your bosom a little closer and make them spies of the others. And if you reward them, they'll then keep people under control. And I think we still have some of that. I think that is part of the strategy of our former president, that he always knew, he was always confident. I can buy me whatever I need. Buy me some people in the gay community, buy me some people in the Black community. I can buy folk and they'll show up and they'll say, I'm fine. And that will create confusion, enough confusion that I'll get the highest percentage of Black votes of any other Republican president since Lincoln, probably. So I think that we do have some challenges, Tommy, that there are always, And that's the thing that we keep thinking, that we keep looking for this day that will somehow the Black community will be a unified community when we're all different. We are in fact different. And so to look for that may be a bit unrealistic. Let's see those thoughts. I agree with this. Those are the thoughts of people who subconsciously are selfish, lack self-confidence. I see that. I try to tell my children, I don't know who said it, whether it was Mandela that said, never be in the presence of people that you have to make yourself small to make them comfortable. I agree with that. But we do live in that world. And so sometimes you have that. And so people operate out of that. What I try to do, I'm going to put a big and a capital T on try. On my good days, I try to give grace to that. I try not to let that throw me. On my bad days and ordinary days, I'm as pissed about that as anybody else. Like, why would people do that? Why would they do that? You know, it makes no sense. But let's see what Charlie has said. Now, this is a bit here. Most people live from the perspective of scarcity and competition. They only believe that there is enough for themselves and not enough for you. So they are less inclined to help you. Tommy, what do you think about that?
So I would agree with that. And because I've experienced it before, I've seen it before, I've decided personally to continue to make that shift. And that's why you and I are having these diversity conversations. That's why you and I are business colleagues, personal friends and brothers. We're family members, Eric, because we know with the bigger scheme of things,
that's right,
that there's more work to be done than people to do it. Right. And so it's not about, competition, right? Because the work needs to be done. Right. It's not about scarcity. Right. Because I do understand that. I'm talking about with us. Right. And with others that we work with and, partner with. It's about, man, there's so much stuff. It's like being in healthcare. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is people seem to always be sick. Right. And those who are healthy today may be ill tomorrow. Right. Those who are ill tomorrow will be healthy the next day and then get sick. So folks who are in healthcare, they don't care for one ill person and say, that's good. Right. That's good. I helped one person because no one else is going to get sick. Right. And they said, no, we're busy every day in our establishment. Right. And I think that what's happening from the perspective as Charlie Winburn is talking about is that we got comfortable in not covering our mouth when we are spewing things that can make others ill. Come on, we just spit it out. And social media is a platform that we're using a lot, we being human beings, and spewing illness and sickness out, such that folks on this call, in this conversation, we're like, I hear it on social media, I hear it in community, I see it in my environment.
And so this is such a valuable conversation. The consumer culture is the work of the empire. Dan, tell us more about what you mean there. I think he means the work of the enemy, and that in many ways, all of us are getting caught up in the consumer culture. I would love to be able to say, no, it hasn't affected me.
Yeah, it hasn't affected me either.
Anything if you say that. I don't think you have to say anything, but I think that we all are. We all are, and we have to just look at, how do I fight that off? How do I look at what true happiness means? How do I look at the value of investing in others? And so that's work, Tommy, I think it's work that's on a continuum. And so I think that on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, and lifetime, whether you are a fan of inclusion is not a yes or no question. It's a continuum. Am I caring a lot and investing a lot into it, or little?
Yeah.
And then along which dimensions am I? You and I are investing a lot in it professionally. Then we have to look at our own personal lives and say, inclusion. What does that mean? Well, Tommy, so here's where you and I run into that. People that like us and want to connect with us. So you have the question of, do I connect with strangers, people that want to connect with me, or do I spend more time with my family? That's a continuum. It can be asked on the continuum of inclusion. Am I including those people? Some of them feel like, hey, you never call me up. Well, actually, I'm making a choice. I'm making a choice. Sometimes that I'm going to try to spend more time with the people close to me. Now, you can evaluate that as whether that's the right or wrong choice, but that's what I'm saying. Across a whole number of dimensions, we have to ask ourselves, are we being inclusive? And I think the answer is it's continuum. We're somewhere on that thing. We're probably not as far along as we'd like to think we are. And I think if too many of us say, hey, I'm at the finish line, I'm waiting for other people to get there. And that's what I see people doing. I'm at the finish line and I'm sitting down waiting on others to get this. So for me, that's a concern.
That's a concern. That's a concern. And I know there's some other topics we may want to jump on,
yes,
and the community's chomping at the bit as well.
Right. So let me throw out the one that the two that are closest on us this week. Certainly, the violence against Asians at the spas in Atlanta, and then Governor Cuomo and what he's going through right now. Tommy, any reactions to either of those?
So with regards to the insensitive and maybe even hateful, well, not even maybe, they are hateful acts against our brethren, the Asian community, who are our brethren, just like any other community.
Right.
What I think, Eric, is that racism is still alive and working.
Right.
It has not died down.
Right.
Racism is not only one particular race diametrically opposed with another.
Right.
Racism is a mindset, mentality, philosophy that begins in one's head that drives their behavior or speech.
Right.
So what we're experiencing right now is, unfortunately, Eric, it's not different than in years past.
Right.
Where we had Americans in this country of different cultures, and then we had a particular incident in the early 1940s, and there was a bombing of a naval base that was based in Hawaii, where some Americans at that time did not believe that Hawaii was part of the United States. And then this particular attack happened, and folks said, inclusion through convenience, that is a part of America.
Right.
That's an attack on us. And who attacked us? This particular culture or nation. Let's find those people who are here, and began to attack them who are American citizens right here in the mainland, not only in Hawaii. Some of us, including myself, I was not alive 1941. And some of us were, right? But I wasn't. So I just read or listened to people who may or may not have been there. I am seeing and witnessing the same type of retroactive behavior against a particular culture.
Right.
So that's the long version of what I think. The short version is I get frustrated, angry, and sad.
Right. I like those
because
words.
if it's not this community, Eric, it's going to be another community. If it's not another community, it will be my community. And we have to stop this.
Right. Right.
It's not just a quick post with some letters on it, some words.
Right.
This stuff has to stop, and we have to have the courage, we being people who are of goodwill, have the strength and the courage to stand up against ill will. There is evil in this world.
Right. That's right. And Tommy, go ahead, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
And no, I was just going to say we can talk about, you know, a little stab at Cuomo and our thoughts there too.
Yeah. But let me come back to this one, because Tommy, I'll tell you that I don't think they were doing a good enough job reporting on it. In other words, our reports are blanket killer shoots up and kills 6 or 7 people at spa. And then we go to, is this a hatred crime? And we really don't share enough a lot of what's happening on social media so that we can see what hate sounds like. Because people aren't tying these two together. Cancel culture, because all we said was Asian spas. And then the sheriff said he was having a bad day. So then we went in on that. And so people said, see there, you can't even say anything before. But man, when I started hearing some of the attacks that Japanese and Korean newscasters are getting every time because of what the last administration was talking about, the China flu and all like that, man, they're getting death threats. At hospitals, people don't want to have them serve them, work on them, even if they're dying. They're getting called fat slobs and just all kind of crazy names, man. And I mean, that kind of hatred, until we can see it, we only hear what is defined as the political correctness handling of the political issue. And I think we're missing the depth of this ugliness that's blending right into common everyday culture. I remember 5 years ago, Tommy, I started looking at the Ku Klux Klan website, and I was seeing some of the things that they were saying that they believed. Just curious. And then I looked at some of the conservative platforms, and honestly, Tommy, they sounded exactly alike.
Right.
If you took Klan off of this one, it would sound a lot like this nationalistic. And so now that is what we're seeing today, is a blending and a lack of angst, outrage from people that claim to be conservatives, of violent acts that are done in the name of conservatism. And that's scary. But I think that when you turn it to our side, I'm not sure if we have, I'm not saying that these are equivalent, but I don't think we have the same outrage when somebody burns down something. To some extent, we believe, especially when the fight is righteous in our view, then we have less frustration at the tactics that are taken in order to bring about change.
I would also encourage folks to suspend their any tendency to want to politicize acts of bias and hate.
Yeah,
it's not right. An act of bias or hate, it's not political at all.
Right.
Until it is.
Right.
What it is an act of bias and hate. And there's some folks that believe that we should not really do these things, regardless of your class or regardless of your influence or regardless of your political view or lean. But, you know, some people say that, you know, I killed those people because of my political ideology. We have to say time out, right?
What?
Going to an Eric Ellis moment. Time out. What? Right?
When did we get here?
When did we get here? And so I think, Eric, we have always been here, at least in America. Right? I think so. So we've been here, either the separation of our religious ideology, that folks transition from one country and then to another land, and maybe, you know, enslave some people from one land, come to another to support that, and then began to institute and indoctrinate those who were enslaved, who were not part of that religion, indoctrinate them into that religion to be able to idolize themselves because they created the religion through the image of themselves.
Right.
so that if you are enslaved and you're practicing this religion, then you will see me, the image, as your God.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was political.
Right.
And that political piece was the separation of access and power, right? Access to property and the liberties for whatever.
Right.
And then the power to control those liberties and change those liberties to be convenient for me. So therefore, fast forward a few hundred years, and we're in today, when there's an act of bias, an act of hate, even violence, it's easier for me to politicize it, because then I'm putting that into a larger group of ideology and not taking either the personal accountability
That's good,
or the
Tommy.
moral accountability.
That's good, Tommy.
So there's no more morality in it.
Huge,
it's
man.
Liberal or conservative, it's Democrat or Republican.
This is my team. Whatever they do, I support.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And that's where we are. And
That's
none of us, Eric,
that's
none of us were born our political ideology. None of us.
That's it.
Right. And so that's important, because we have to track back. When did we learn to think that way?
Right.
Why do we continue to think that way? When we see or experience that hate, why do we want to categorize it into political factions?
That's
or
right.
categorize it into we are right, they are wrong, and they have to be removed? Hate is hate is hate.
Exactly. And part of the reason why that tactic has been used, it is a tactic of war. In other words, to be able to kill another person, you have to dehumanize them, and you have to desensitize yourself to their death and their harm so that you can kill them.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying, Tommy, is that we've got to avoid making hate, making isms of whatever kind, making those immediately political, because you're saying that's a problem for us. And I would also say that part of what I'm hearing here, Tommy, is this notion that we have to pause our energy put into our agenda for ourselves. We have to sometimes pause that to invest in other people's fights, because that humanizes us all. And it ties back to the question of, is anybody interested in inclusion? And that's what you're saying, which is full circle back to where we started. The only way to get there is to stop making these issues political, and to, from a negative side. So let me qualify that, because political is not all bad. From a negative side, only to oppose someone else and to allow the politicization to desensitize me to their hurt and their pain. That's what you're saying, which I love. And so I think that really leads us right back to home, man. And part of what the answer is, we talked about that earlier.
Again, I think you're spot on. And this conversation is something that a lot of people are having, either directly or indirectly. And the direct is they're having a conversation about what's happening to our Asian colleagues and brethren. And then indirectly, that, chickens will come home to roost. So the chickens of hate, as an analogy, it will come home. So whatever's happening in, Oakland, California, Atlanta, Georgia, or whatever other city, it will come home in one shape or form. If you live in a community where there are little to no Asian citizens, and so therefore there's no hate against Asians physically in your city, in your town, is there any other form of hate? Are you hate-free, violence-free, vice-free, right? If there's any addictions in your small town and there's no Asians, the question is, how did people get addicted to whatever drug? It got in there.
Right.
So someone somewhere else is hating on your town. You got to understand that, right? We didn't create this opioid addiction. Opioids were created, and then they were abused, and they were sold, and they're oversold, and then there was a lack of responsibility. Yep, you got pain. Let's give you an overdose of opioid.
Right.
Now your town is rampant with addiction. I didn't have anything to do with that.
Right.
Yeah, you don't really care about certain topics until those topics come home and they're personal.
That's right. That's right. And
other
so
than that, I'm trying to, polarize them. You're over there, I'm over here.
That's right. And so we said a couple of things along the way here, that people are self-interest oriented. And then, is there anybody that's interested in inclusion and not just being included? I would say we tie those together. I would say that inclusion is in my self-interest. So as I include Tommy Lewis, that has enriched my life. You know what I'm saying? We've gotten smarter together than we were separately. So that's the beauty of this, is that inclusion is not simply some self-sacrificing thing. It actually fundamentally can be defined as in your own self-interest. Because now I know I've got a brother in the world who's thinking about me. And if he hits the lottery, we hit the lottery. If I hit the lottery, we hit the lottery. And I think that we have to find ways to make all of this relevant to more people. Let's spend just a minute or two about Governor Cuomo. Tommy, he went from media darling, national pastor, COVID-19 pastor. He was an outstanding communicator, communicated a lot of integrity in terms of how he operated. I think our governor was one of those figures nationally that looked like he was rising above partisanship to be a pastor to Ohio. And now we're in some place different. Tommy, what's your analysis of this, and what does it mean in the conversation of inclusion?
Three things, Eric. First, many of us, most of us, do not know the facts.
Right. Okay. Come on now.
Right.
Weighing
so
in.
There is, our truth, their truth, her truth, his truth, and then the truth that only God will be able to really judge at the end of the day. But for us, we're just speculating on these facts. Some of us don't even know, have never met Cuomo. We were only introduced to him because of the pandemic and some of the conversations that he was having, and then maybe even a discourse against the former president. We were on one side or the other, and then he was in the spotlight.
Right.
But 2 years ago and before, we never heard of him.
Right. Okay.
The other is that when there is smoke, there is fire. And so I would not put beyond anyone or anything that there was some speech or behaviors that was received aggressively or maybe inappropriately.
Right.
Right. That's with anything. I have found myself in situations where I've had to quickly check myself. Oh my goodness, I didn't mean to say that. Right. And it could have been taken somewhere very quickly.
Right.
The third is that there's also a system, Eric. And the system may be a cultural system of really tearing people down. I want to be very clear with that. That is that we are exposed to what's happening to certain people, even ourselves, attacks and things like that, at some of the oddest times.
Right.
So some of the things that may have happened last year, not discrediting it, or years ago, why now? Right? What system or power structure has really supported folks to come out to speak their truth? And Did they not have the courage before this moment? Would they have the courage after this moment? But there's always the moment. So I just know of myself and many others that elevate to some sense of power, some sense of authority, some sense of influence, that there's always people wanting to take or destroy that power, influence, or even character or life of another person or group of people.
Right. And I would also add to that, Tommy, is that the women that have come forward, I do believe that we have an obligation to hear them credibly. And I would say that we don't know their story at all. We don't know either the story, oftentimes, of what really happened to them, and we don't know what they're going through right now. That as soon as your name surfaces, now you get on the hate mails list as well, where you're getting beat up on a regular basis and nobody's reporting on that. We're basically sitting back like a Super Bowl taking score on whether Cuomo's going to live or die in this moment. And I think that, we all have to live our lives in such a way that if our worst actions come forward, it may not be our worst actions that kill us. It will be our ability to explain them, to own them. That's really what ultimately sinks us. It's not what we did when we were in college. It's what growth has happened since then. Politics is a dirty business, man. It's an ugly business, man. And you know that as well. I've seen this happen with people that I believe that in many ways, sometimes they leave weakened people in position so that at any moment when it was more convenient for them to get rid of them, they had those aces in the hole to utilize to get rid of them. But I would say this. Let me go further than Cuomo's situation, because I don't think the issues around him. Yes or no? I think that the Attorney General is doing a great job, is doing a credible job. I think there's some credible investigations going on. Good news. But I would say that there are thousands of women, tens and thousands of women that are going through similar things on a regular basis. And I don't think that Me Too movement did a lot to change that, Tommy. I believe that most women still do not have enough confidence in the policies and the actions and the leadership of the places that they reside, that they have confidence that if something happens to them and they come forward with that the system is going to protect them. I find that too many women still are fearful that retaliation is what's going to happen. I'm going to be moved. I'm going to be fired. It's going to harm me bringing that forth, which brings additional victimization to me.
I agree.
Yeah.
Men in general are not fully supporting Me Too.
Right.
And then we have some men who have, in other words, been martyred, right? Some of these high profile individuals that have been called out, that have been identified and then sent through the ringer, maybe even respectfully and deservedly, right? But those are the less than 0.001% of men. We have the average Joe walking down the street,
whistling, hollering,
saying things and doing things to women. Right.
Regular.
And women know this because, it's even men who are attracted to that woman may receive a response that's negative, such as I'm married or I'm not interested. And that man who moment one was attracted is now the aggressor, verbally, psychologically. And for a woman to go through that all the time with the ambiguity of is this real or is this going to turn into a nightmare? There we go.
Yep. Right. And so we'll come back to this because misogyny is pandemic. And I think it is that men are going to have to take more leadership around this. We're going to have to be the ones to speak up more. This is back to the question around inclusion. And are we going to fight this first in ourselves, and then in those around us, and then in those in positions of power? And I think that that's what I'm calling upon. What I would say, Tommy, we asked the question, does anybody really care about inclusion? And what is the long-term forecast? I would say that the forecast gets brighter if none of us declare ourselves saved, or declare ourselves as having arrived, or declare ourselves as a perpetual champion of this work. I think unless all of us recognize that within me is bias, within me is exclusion, within me is those things. I think that as I recognize that, it always then supercharges me or empowers me to do things on the place where I have the greatest influence, and that's here. And as every one of us begin to do our part, I think it more qualifies us to then weigh in on trying to identify the most effective solutions, not just being loud, not just opposing, but trying to define what are the most effective solutions that yield progress in this space. That's harder, isn't it, Tommy?
That's harder. That's harder.
Yeah.
Eric, another great conversation.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for staying with us today. I know you're out on your vacation. I hope the missus is still up in the room or at the spa. Maybe she's getting a massage or something right now. But you tell her we sent our love. And I thank you for being your brilliant self today, man. You were rich today, as always. We enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, community. You guys weighed in today. You did your work. We love you. You're thinking. You're making us think. And we all walk away the better, don't we, Tommy?
We do. We do.
All right. Well, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week for another wonderful conversation. We're probably going to stay in this vein just a little bit longer around inclusion and trying to determine who really cares about that. Because, Tommy, you and I are going after this as though it can change. Right. We're going to ask the question again. Community, do your work and let us know what's the evidence that we can make progress in this space. Love you all. Bye now.